All right, we're live here with Rich McDowell. I'm Alicia Brown with the Black Swan team of Remax Town and Country, and Rich has so graciously agreed to come back on with us today and talk about a topic that can be really good, but often has a bad rap, just because we're all confused by it. It's just this crazy nebulous thing that rules our life, and no one knows how to navigate it. So Rich is here to talk about credit and what it means, how we play the game of credit, and give us lots of tips on what we can do to build our credit, repair our credit, and at the end we'll talk about how to help our children establish credit. So Rich, we'll just go ahead and get started. I know that one big confusion out there is everyone wants to check their credit and they go through different services. And what is your insight on which services should we be looking at? Does it hurt us to look at those credit scores? And then what's the difference between like your Credit Karma, all of that, and what you pull for credit? So kind of we'll start there.
Yeah, no, it's great point. And Alicia, thanks so much for letting me jump on with you guys again. So the one thing that I would suggest is for all of us, we all want the perfect credit score, right? We want, man, my credit's this, I'm confident, I can go buy and do whatever I want because I can get it. The engines over the last several years, your freecreditreport.coms, your Credit Karma, Creditwise, all of those are consumer facing credit reports. So what does that mean? Well, I am a consumer, so I want to see what I get. Mm-hmm. Consumer facing doesn't have the algorithm like the MyFICO, right? So when you look at it through lending institutions, they're going to scrutinize it and have an algorithm that's a little bit stronger than just, hey, can I go get a Best Buy product, or can I go get a Capital One card, or whatever the case might be. The reality is of it, we're going to lend on $200,000. We want substance. We want a score. We want a guidance. So that's kind of the miss. I always tell people, if I was king for a day, I would give us all like the same credit score, the scoring systems. So yeah. There's very few that I have found that are extremely accurate that are free. So okay. Again, I'll use what Mama and Grandma used to tell us: is nothing in this world is free. The Credit Karmas, Creditwise are backed for consumers. They want that piece. They get that piece. Hey, get our card, get this. Mm-hmm. What I have found, and this is from personal experience as well as just individuals that manage it, if you pay for a service, you are going to get a closer score like what we get. Now, the one thing that I've heard a lot lately as well, I think there's like Experian Boost or this, or I can pay extra. So again, if you start paying for things, they are going to be somewhat in the ballpark. Do I suggest you pay for credit monitoring? Not necessarily. What I would say is, if you as an individual, say, take a 2 to 4 year process and say, what has my credit been? Have I paid my bills on time? If I have $1,000 limit, do I keep it roughly around $150, $200 a month, or do I pay it off? How do I manage my credit? That is going to be huge on what it takes for the credit score. So when I look at it, is just as a, not necessarily even a plug, but something, if you're out there and you're saying, well, I don't want a lender to do a hard pull, but mm-hmm. I do want to know what my credit score is that is going to be somewhat accurate what a lender goes. Mm-hmm. I would tell you to log on to myfico.com. So okay. www.myfico.com. I want to say I did this 3 or 4 years ago, and it's like a $30 a month service. And so it will give you all 3 credit scores. It will give you things to do to boost your credit. But again, my question to you as an individual then would be, is that worth $360 a year to you to know your credit score? Or do you just do the things that you know are right, and then at the end of the day, when you need a lender to pull your credit, you kind of know, yes, I've paid my bills on time. No, I've not been delinquent. know this, know that. Yes, that's what I've done. So I would tell you that is what I would suggest. Again, the free credit reporting is great, but those are secondary entities that are owned typically by law firms, because what their goal is, hey, my credit's not as high as I want. Now I want you to do credit repair.
Got it.
So be cautious on, buyer beware type stuff. Your credit bureaus are responsible to give you a free credit report every year. So if you, utilize it on a birthday or an anniversary date or something that that, hey, every time it hits this date, I need to order my 2020 credit report. That is something that's free to you, that's paid for, by your Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. So
and
that's something.
Straight to their websites.
You could go straight to their website. Hey, I need a free credit report. That way you can kind of check to see who's pulled your credit, because like, again, if you go back to credit cards, XYZ, you've signed some disclosure in there that says they can look at your financials, they can look at your credit every so often. Well, what if they're doing that every 4 months and you don't know that? But they're checking that to see if they want to increase your APR, if they want to decrease your credit value, whatever. You want to make sure that you're managing that piece. And so from that standpoint, I would tell you that's what I would do. It is kind of from that some point, that piece, because until a lender actually pulls your credit, we don't know what your credit score is. And I can't give an approval letter based off of, hey, Creditwise said this or Credit Karma said that. I'm going to have to do a hard pull to your credit. So I think that answered kind of that question on the.
So kind of summarize, I think from what you were saying is, it's not necessarily essential to be checking your credit constantly, but if you want a general idea of what's going on, ask for your yearly credit reports from each of the bureaus.
Right.
And then if you want a more accurate reading, to go to what was it? My FICO?
MyFICO.com. And what I can do after this, Alicia, is I can send you a link and we'll tag it in below if you want, just so people have access to it.
Okay. And then if some people still just really want to do their getting it from Credit Karma, stuff like that, just knowing that it's not always as accurate as a hard pull from a lender or something like that. But give you like a general idea, but very, very rough, and not necessarily 100% accurate.
I would tell you, my experience is people that have paid their bills and managed their credit correctly, it's closer than when it's not. Again, just so everybody has the baseline of the FICO algorithm that mortgage lenders use, 350 is the absolute worst, 850 is the absolute perfect. And so I think there's some out there and some criteria out there that says, hey, 950 is perfect, or 500 is the baseline. For us, that's not. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, the good, the bad, we the higher the credit score, the less money you're going to pay over the life of the loan. And that's for insurance. That's going to be for your interest rate. That's going to be just overall financial health. Got it.
Now, if you're doing these, like monthly, like if someone really wants to know every month what it is, and they're reaching out to these either paying companies to do it or going through those free reports. Now, is that damaging their credit if you do that every month?
We don't ever see Credit Karma because, again, it's not an algorithm that's a hard pull. So it's a very, that's why I think it's become, and again, I'm speaking a little bit without the research here, but I think that's why it's become a little bit popular. Well, I want a soft credit pull. Lenders do not do soft credit pull. We're going to do, because in order for us to legally give you an approval letter, we have to see the good, the bad, the ugly of the credit aspect of it. As to tracking that, I think it's absolutely great tracking it. I think you can track that somewhat with just common sense knowledge of, I've paid my bills on time, I keep my credit available. I think and listen, I was there back in college. You go to the student union center and 18 credit cards were given to you just because you went to the university, right? So at the end of the day, you look out there, hey, I've got 18 credit cards. That's not necessarily the best thing for you. So, I would just say buyer beware. The one thing that I would absolutely advise against is and typically you get this around the holiday time, is the companies and the retailers that, take 10% off and get our credit card. Well, unless you're just buying a tremendous amount of product, 10% off on a 29% APR, it doesn't work. And so be cautious of, just because those credit inquiries are hard pulls, and they are also treated very harshly on your credit because they're impulse decisions. You're sitting there at the register making let's call it you buy $1,000 worth of stuff at said retailer, $100. I mean, so you're making $100 decision on impulse. And I just don't think that's a great thing to do, and so be aware of that. Just unless you're one of those that, I'll get a credit card and I'll pay it off, I still don't think that's a valuable tool to use.
Got it. So what, in your opinion, are good ways to start building your credit up?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways if you can look at it, right? There's hey, I've never had credit. Mom and dad took care of me the whole time. My mom and dad have great credit. And so I have very limited credit. And so that's kind of going to be done under a different pathway, if you will. One of the things that is great that I think anybody should do if you're in that situation, and this is, I would say, on both trying to build your credit as well as establish quality credit, is apply for a secure card. And so again, you bank at ABC Bank, go in there and say, hey, I'd like to have a $500 secured card. Well, what that basically means is you give them $500, they set your limit at $500, and then as you charge on it and things like that, you still have to pay use it for a gas card or whatever, right? Now you've got to pay the $100 a month on that card to still keep the $500 limit, but you are establishing credit. You're almost like investing in yourself, and in turn, you're going to allow yourself to that's a positive thing you can do. The other thing is, and this is one that we're scary of, and so I would tell you more from your kids, not your boyfriend, girlfriend situation, is you've had a credit card or whatever, you've had a card for 10, 15 years. Your kid hits 16, put them as an authorized user on your credit card. You can set limits on that secondary card. And when they go out with their friends or they're doing this or they're getting gas or whatever, they're building credit. You're helping them manage that as a parent. But now if you have a 10-year credit history, now your child at 16 has 10 years of credit history. And so you establish
as a great vehicle. But my question is it possible to put them as an authorized user, never tell them they're an authorized user, they never use that card, but they just reap the benefits of you always using your card, or do they have to use their card?
I would tell you go by card by card. I would tell you what I've kind of found out is, and this is kind of just something I wrote down. If you become an authorized user, you should make sure that you have a good relationship with the primary card holder and that you have clearly established ground rules and communications for using the account. So I can't answer 1,000% to your question. I think it's a great question. I think it's one that you could secretly help your children build credit. But the value on that is time. And so now if you look at it kind of in the scenario that we just spoke about, mom and dad took care of everything. I went off to college and they took care of everything. And then at the end of the day, now I don't have any length of credit. You are almost giving them a gift of length of credit. And truthfully, as a parent, it gives you an idea of what they're spending their money on, right?
Yeah, it's a great teaching moment because while they're home and you can monitor and be in charge of kind of their spending habits, it's a lot easier to teach them then than
Right.
when they're
Right.
off and doing their own
Right.
thing.
Because, truthfully, through the, secondary education and high school and things of that nature, you're not getting told how to manage a budget. You might run a class on it. You might, hey, here's your job. Here's this. Go buy something. You might do a little surface level piece, but very rarely are you really diving in on how to manage our finances.
Right.
The other thing that I would say on a couple of things on building a credit profile is some lending institutions have a credit builder loan. And so what that basically would mean is, let's talk about, and this is kind of old school, but your kiddo wants a $1,500 bike, and they go and get basically the old Signature loan from said bank, and then make them pay it back over 2 years. So then they get a very small amount of credit, and then they're establishing themselves on paying that back. And it's just kind of called a credit builder loan. And again, I would say go to your lending institutions as a parent if you're trying to do that for your kiddos to get that done. If you're trying to do it for yourself, just walk into the bank and say, hey, what is a credit builder loan? Knowing that it's going to be on a 12 or 24-month term. So these are things as you're looking at it saying, I'm getting out of college, or I want to buy my first house, my lease expires in a year. What things could I be doing today that will benefit me 8, 12, 14 months from now? So when I'm ready to buy a home, credit is not my challenge. And so that's what I would say. And then the kind of the final thing, and this kind of goes back to my college criteria with the student center, don't apply for too many credit. Too much credit's not a good thing, because then you don't know how to use it. You don't know how to manage it. You have 7 cards and you're trying to keep all of them at, 19, 22% of credit usage. That can get chaotic, and you're gonna stub your toe. And so just manage it in a way that is beneficial to you.
So is there a recommended balance for any credit cards or anything like that to keep it at about that 20% mark?
Yeah, I think the standard through the industry is going to tell you 30%. I would tell you, I've seen the higher credit scores typically range about 19 to 22% of available credit. So again, $1,000 limit, 19 to 22% of that. And the key component is, and this is where you can get tired head and kind of nerd out on it, if you will, but looking at it where what day does said credit company actually report to the credit bureau? Because if you've got 30 days, not everybody's reporting on the first, right? Because if you're debt, like I know I've got some credit cards that are due the 22nd or the 18th or whatever. So what day is the due date? And then what day is the day that you report to the bureau? Because while you might say, well, May 1st is Friday, I'm going to pay my bill down to 19%, but it actually doesn't report to the credit bureau till the 17th of May. And now you've put $400 on there. You don't ever get the benefit of when that reports to the bureau. So it's a great question to ask. Again, these are things that as you want to manage your credit, the biggest key token out there, pay your bills on time. You don't have to get into the who and when they report, just pay your bills on time. But as you're trying to establish what that is, as you're trying to buy a $200,000 house, you might want to reach out to your creditors and say, hey, when do you actually report to the credit bureau?
Okay, that makes sense.
The next thing I kind of had, if that answered your question, is the one that I think every one of us have fallen into, myself included, is I stubbed my toe. Now what can I do to fix my credit, right?
How do I pull myself back out? And
right. And know that, you're not the only one that's ever done that, right? And so it's kind of the segue in there, right? Is writing it down. I put pay your bills on time. At some point, when you look at what lending institutions do, we go back in 12, 24, 36-month increments.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you've not paid your bills for 35 months and you pay it on time on the 36th month, that's not going to be a great solution for us. That's almost day one of starting to establish good credit.
Mm-hmm.
Have that, look at the increments on, have I done everything I needed to do over the last 12 months? Have I done everything?
Like utilities, mortgage, rent, like all that? Or are you even going like medical bills, or is that something completely different?
Can I come back to the medical bills? Because that's a huge one that I think we all need to be aware of, and yet it's one that does hurt folks. So let me come back to that.
Okay.
What I would tell you is know what all is reported to your credit bureau. Is your company that you're currently renting or leasing from reporting to the credit bureau? If that answer is yes, great. If it's not, maybe ask your landlord, ask your apartment complex, hey, would you report my rent to the credit bureaus? Mm-hmm. Some will do it, some won't. I believe there's a cost to the business in that. I don't know that piece of it. As a timeout in this, lenders will allow for non-traditional credit, meaning that, hey, if we have a 2-year history of somebody paying said apartment for 2 years, we can do a verification of rent, get that proven, and do a supplement on that credit report, adding that rental history back to it to see if we can establish a credit score.
Okay.
So that's one, and I'm going to get a great segue again. Number 2 was get credit for making utility and cell phone payments. Right? Every one of us have a cell phone. Every one of us has utilities. Allow them to give you that credit for making those payments. The other one was pay off debt and keep balances low on credit cards.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did copy this off credit utilization ratio. It says lenders typically like to see low ratios of 30% or less, and people with the best credit scores often have very low credit utilization ratios. And so that's kind of what we were talking about there. Mm-hmm. Apply for new credit accounts only as needed. And so this kind of goes back to, hey, this retailer said, take 10% off. I wanted to save $100. Do you really need that credit card? And my argument would be, if you really need the $100 savings, you probably shouldn't be buying all this stuff, right? So, and then I think at the end of the day, the other piece is do not apply for too much credit just with the inquiries. And so if you look at it as we do track inquiries, and everybody that applies for a loan will have to answer credit inquiry questions of, hey, Freeman, or whatever the company is, of, did you get a new car loan? Did you get this? Did you get that? And they're going to have to go through and answer why they had somebody pull their credit, and then did they establish new credit? And those two things can and will hurt you in buying a home, because if you did acquire, go ahead. If you did,
the credit inquiries, mainly the car, any sort of loan, credit card, all of that, or would, like, when someone goes to get a new cell phone plan, they want to pull your credit, is that considered an inquiry as well?
It is inquiry. The cell phone is an inquiry, but then you can just say, cell phone data was updated or whatever the case might be. The ones that do absolutely crush and can kill mortgage deals are, I applied for, again, a said retailer. They were offering a 0% on household goods. I was getting my refrigerator, my couch, my blah, 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 blah. And so they had, $10,000 worth of stuff. But even though it's at 0%, lenders have to add a certain amount of payment back in there, even if that 0% is for 12 months or 18 months or whatever. Mm-hmm. We know that bill's coming now, and so we have to include that in our approval. And so if you're at a higher DTI and now all of a sudden you've got $10,000 worth of 0% interest, we're having to add $500 to your payment thereabouts, and now your debt ratio's out, and we're telling you 2 weeks before closing you can't buy the house, and yet you have a whole
house furniture.
It look great in your apartment. So, kind of go forward from there. And then the last piece, and this kind of goes to, I think, the collections of medical is depending on delinquencies, bankruptcies, things that are negative. The more negative it is, the longer it takes to reestablish credit, right? They're not going to just flip a switch and say, oh, in 2019, they had a bad year, but 2020 they're good, right? Or even let's go through this current pandemic. Just because people are getting told they can miss house payments and they can do this and they can do that, do everything in your possible control to pay your bills on time. That's going to be where you're most helpful on that. And then the credit piece of the collections on medical. Credit repair companies will always tell us, oh, we'll dispute those, we'll get them removed because of HIPAA compliance things. I don't know that to be 100% accurate. We don't count medical against them, but it does hurt their credit score. And so what that means is, let's say we have $2,500 worth of medical collections, it's hurting their credit score, but we're not taking that debt and saying, hey, you have to pay it. Whereas if you had a $2,500 credit card charge off, we're going to need to get that clarified or taken care of. At the end of the day, you've got to pay your bills on time and you've got to protect your credit. And what I would tell you, a lot of those medical companies, not talking to them is not the right answer. Talk to them and say, hey, all I can afford is, $17 a month for right now. Well, can you put me on a payment plan for that? And I'll just pay you every month with the ideal that one day I'll get you paid off if I get a bonus or I get this, I get that, right?
Something's better than nothing.
Absolutely. And again, I would tell you a mistake that I made as a younger person, and again, I'll use the college aspect of it, not talking to the people that have lent you money. Don't be afraid of that conversation. If you get somebody that's a jerk or rude on the phone, just say, hey, can I talk to your manager? It's at the end of the day, most people want to help you. And so that's what I would suggest.
Okay. So to kind of recap, so if their credit's not where they want it to be and they're wanting to repair it, so your main suggestions are make sure you're, from this point forward, paying all your bills on time, making sure that that's getting reported as good credit to your to the credit bureaus, and then keep your debt or your percentage of debt on your credit cards to under 30%. Be in contact with anyone that you owe money to and make at least payments. Was there anything I missed there?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think just at the end of the day, manage your credit as something that's important as your health, right? And the reason I say that is because credit goes with deposits on utilities when you buy a house. Credit goes to what you get for insurance. There's a lot of things out there that are affected by your credit rating. Protect it and promote a good score. The one thing that I would maybe just add to that is, I know there's institutions out there and philosophies out there that I should pay cash for everything. I completely disagree with that. If you pay cash for everything, how is a lending institution going to sit there and say, okay, you've shown enough that we're in a position to lend you $200,000 on a house, yet you've never proven the ability to pay a creditor? And so then you're penalizing yourself. And so I don't say go get into debt either. I say beware and understand your plan. And then the last thing I would say on that is, if you don't want to do the Credit Karmas, the Creditwise, the MyFICOs, and all the things that we talked about today, a lender will pull your credit and do a hard inquiry, but they can also tell you, if you do these three things, your credit score will go from here to there. And they can give you kind of a path to qualification. At the end of the day, you and I've said this a couple of times over the last several weeks, we want them in a house they can afford and an interest rate they're happy with, and that the ultimate experience is great. And anything that we can do to do that, just know that's what our main goal is in getting you into your home.
No, I like that. Yeah, because I know a lot of people who, sorry, my allergies are bad. I know a lot of people who want to pay cash for everything, and it's super responsible thing to do. I mean, if you're able to manage everything that you can pay cash for absolutely everything, I mean, that's phenomenal. But unfortunately, we live in a society that's built around credit.
Right.
And if you can't prove that you have good credit, even though you pay everything with cash, and obviously you're way more responsible than most Americans,
Right.
unfortunately, it doesn't get you anywhere, which is
Right.
really unfortunate. So I like some of the things that you talked about that kind of help establish that credit, having that credit card, but paying it off every month and all that stuff that shows that, yes, I do manage my money, but then you're still essentially paying cash because you just pay it off with your cash at the end of every month. So it's just
No,
kind of
absolutely.
that dedication and the diligence there.
And
But
I'm going to leave you with one last nugget, and again, I'll send it so we can attach it on the link. There are, and I know I get irritated of it. There is something that you can opt out of the pre-screen, so you get home in your apartment, you get home in your home, and you just get these, hey, 0% transfers, this, get new credit, blah, blah, blah. Those are affecting your credit score, believe it or not.
really,
Because at some point you've signed off somewhere that your data can be pre-screened, and so they're looking at things that are out there in the world that, hey, you make a certain amount of money, you have a certain credit profile, you have this, you have that. Now these are the folks that, we send 1,000 of them to this particular area that has this. 10% of them are going to sign up for a credit, so it makes sense for that company to keep doing that, right? And so you can opt out of those, and that will improve your credit score. Typically, on average, I would tell you 7 to 12 points, and they're good. I want to say the opt out is good for either 2 years or 5 years, and you can actually permanent opt out. But I would tell you, as you sign up for new credit and new credit cards through the time, that's where the small print comes in. They'll put you back in that, and so you just kind of want to do that. But I'll send the link to that as well, because I think it's something easy that everybody can do, and something that kind of takes the temptation of the cookie on the counter, off. You're not getting inundated with all the credit aspect of it, so just opt out of that.
That's great to know. I had no idea that affected anything. So
Yeah.
rip up and throw away.
That's right.
Really helpful. Oh, one more question I did think of. If someone's wanting to repair their credit and follow those steps, like you said, how long does this process normally take? A couple months, a couple years? Does it just depend on where you're at in the cycle?
I would tell you the easy answer is it depends on where you're at in the cycle, right? If you had it again, we'll use a bankruptcy or a foreclosure or something just absolutely negative in the last 12 months. It's you're 24 to 48 months away from really being able to do something. If it's something that, hey, I stubbed my toe, 2 years ago with one late pay, it might be you're ready to go now. And I would tell you that in my experience of doing this over the last several years, some of the people that think they have the worst credit end up having the best credit, and they're just so paranoid on it. And then others that think they have great credit might be misled a little bit. So I would tell you that it absolutely doesn't hurt to talk to yourself, talk to me, and say, hey, look, this is what we're thinking of doing. My lease expires in 6 months. When is the right time for us to look at that? And that might be just a conversation, and we can, based on experience, say, hey, well, why don't you do this, this, and this? And when we get within inside that 90 to 60 days of the lease being expired, we'll dive completely into it and see where we are credit wise at that point. And so again, as you know, that's a service we provide for you guys.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Rich.
No, you're good.
Has any further questions? Because I know this is kind of a hot topic, and there are lots of really more nuanced things, and it depends on each situation. Feel free to reach out, like Rich said, to either myself or Rich. Our contact information's on the bottom. We're happy to help, like Rich said, in any way we can. We want to help you reach your goals and accomplish everything you want to get done, and it's helpful to have the tools and the knowledge and information to do what you want to do and feel empowered to get that done. So we're here to help, and thank you, Rich, for sharing your knowledge and expertise on that. And until next time, we'll see y'all soon.
Well, that sounds great. Everybody stay safe out there.
Thank you.